The Artist Life Part 2. Today I shall tell you about one of my greatest failures. Back in 2018, I qualified for the final round of this competition. There I am. I had been doing the regular weekly version of this competition for about a year and was doing consistently very well in it, if I do say so myself. And I ended up qualifying for the final round of the competition, boasting a roster of winners the likes of Dusty Ray Bottoms, Aquaria, Sugarcane. So I was pretty excited and I naturally wanted to win. So I went all out and set about realizing the very ambitious task of making 2 full costumes, one of which involved making a hoop skirt from scratch, and writing, rehearsing, and performing an original song with live musicians that I wrote the music and lyrics for. All of this within a span of a couple of months, with the vast bulk of the work being done in 1 month after they announced the theme of the competition. In short, I had my work cut out for me. On the actual day of the competition, I was stretched to a breaking point. I was sleep deprived as anything. Neither of my costumes were finished. I had had a huge meltdown the night before when I realized the state of things. I spent all morning and afternoon trying to tie the costumes together. There were certain ideas that I had realized at that point that I had to sacrifice, and it was just a matter of getting it stage ready, whatever that meant. So that was my morning and afternoon for hours and hours and hours, and then I had to sit down and get my makeup on and get ready to go. And all the while I was coordinating with the musicians that I was working with. There were 3 of them, and we were bringing with us to the bar that this competition was taking place in a bass drum, a tam-tam, a full keyboard, and a full speaker system. My thought process being it would be easier for us to set up our own sound with our own speaker system rather than trying to route the sounds of the various instruments that we were using through the speaker system of the bar. And we get there and the bar is jam-packed sardines. Really should have expected that. We had all of these instruments, not to mention the giant costume that I had created for my final look. And there was absolutely no room, but we made room somehow. And the competition started. I did my first entrance look and it went well. And then it was time for the performance. We had practiced setting up our speaker system as quickly as possible, but of course we didn't practice keeping in mind the sardine-like nature of the venue. And I think it ended up taking us about, I want to say like a full 15 minutes to set up, which, you know, if you see a show or a competition, usually the time between numbers is like 30 seconds, maybe a minute if somebody needs to set some stuff up, and that's kind of pushing it. 15 minutes. Now, during those 15 minutes, people were getting kind of excited, at least for the first part of those 15 minutes. It seemed like a big event, right? There was like a bass drum, there's a tam-tam. How often do you see that? So I think, and this is all conjecture, I think that an expectation was growing that we were about to jam out on that stage when everything was done. But the song that I had written was very slow and dramatic, and it built to a jam out kind of climax, but it took probably about 5 or 6 minutes to get to that point. It was a long number. And rather than, after all of this time spent setting up, us just starting to crash on our instruments and rock out, you know, it started with a tiny little piano line. It was very quiet, and immediately the audience was gone. There were people that were watching and listening, and that was nice, of course, but the vast majority of the audience just started talking amongst themselves. And then on top of the vibe of the song just not being with the room, I was exhausted and my voice was gone. So I was cracking and fumbling and bumbling all over the place, but we made it through the number. Then it was time to put on the most elaborate and uncomfortable costume that I have ever created for myself. So on that went, and on the stage I went. Somehow I managed to fit on there. And I was thinking to myself, okay, the performance was a bomb. I was slowly realizing that. There's no way I'm gonna win, but maybe I could place in the top 5. That would be sweet. And I didn't. And that was rough because in the regular competition, I had won a bunch of them. I had placed in almost all of them. And then in the grand finale competition, in front, mind you, of tons of New York City nightlife bigwigs, I bombed. Now, the judges did give us their score sheets afterwards, which was incredibly helpful. And I discovered that way that I did very, 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 very well in the costume areas. And it was the performance that did me in. So that was good in a way. I knew that I had some things going for me. But I was so invested in the performance and in the song that I wrote. Not to mention the fact that the song was about a relationship that I had just gotten out of about a year earlier. And it was a hugely vulnerable confessional type thing about my deepest, darkest insecurities that led me towards a relationship of the nature of the one that I had just gotten out of. So I was pouring my heart and soul out on stage. And then that happened. So, terrible experience, but here's the thing. I learned so much from that experience. Most importantly, that I can overcome the most tremendous failure. Sort of like V for Vendetta, I want to say right now. Like, you know, she gets captured and tortured by the secret police, but it was all staged by V. We tried to make her face her biggest fear. And then after she faced that, she was able to live without fear. And that to, you know, in a much tamer scale was what happened to me. I faced a huge fear of mine, failing at something in front of people that I really wanted to impress with something that I felt very, very passionately about. And the fact that I have gone through that has taken away its power. At least to a certain extent, you know, we'll see what the future holds. But I know now that it's faceable, and I licked my wounds and kept going. And one of the greatest parts of this story is that this costume is what I had created for the finale of the competition, and I wore it everywhere afterwards and got a lot of attention for it. And that changed everything for me. Completely. Everything. And that is today's artist life story. Until next time.